Welcome to the FPL USA Press Play podcast. We have a very special episode this week ahead of the Game Week 17 deadline. So, without further ado, how you doing, Mr. Black Wolf?
I'm doing very well. I'm really excited about this episode. I've been wanting this guest on for a long time, and we finally have him. I feel like he needs no introduction. If you listen to this podcast, I'm sure you've heard of this fellow. One of the giants of the FPL community, I would say. Over 140,000 subs on his YouTube channel. He also has a new podcast called FPL Therapy, which I know this podcast loves to listen to. I'm a big fan of the whole integration between psychology and FPL. So I really love that podcast a lot. So it is FPL Raptor, also known as Ross. How you doing, Ross?
Thank you for that lovely introduction. That was very nice. I'll take a leaf out of your book for future guests on FPL Therapy, I think. But yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I'm glad we get to chat. We've obviously interacted a lot on social media before. I'm sure it will come up at some point, but I always come to you as well, Dan, for the info around Wolves, and especially on Game Week 7 wildcard when I brought in Cunha and Nuri, who recently haven't served me too well, but at the time did very well for me. So yeah, I'm excited to talk FPL today. And honestly, we're at that point of the season where we've got so much to talk about. So we'll probably have to try and be as succinct as possible because we could be here for hours.
Really is great to have a pros pro on, and I'm sure you're so used to introducing other folks. So we are happy to return the favor here. And obviously, we're kind of branding ourselves as a hashtag FPL USA podcast, but we've had tons of talented folks join us. So we really appreciate you taking the time, especially at your end of day in England. So I think for us, let's just jump into how our Game Week 16 teams performed on the pitch. Dano, I think you had a mids game week. So walk us through what happened to your hopeful ascent up the leaderboard.
I'm fucking tired of this season. I really am. What a terrible game week once again. 2 game weeks ago, I took out Mbumo and Bruno Fernandes for Saka and Semenyo, and that could not have went any worse. Those 2 other guys have just been returning each week, whereas Saka and Semenyo, 2 points, 3 points each game week. So that was a massive swing for me. I'd probably be in the top 100k if I would have just rolled my transfers, but of course, that's not the way. So I finished on just 44 points this week. My only real returns were the double Arsenal defense and a Solanke assist. But even that was disappointing because I couldn't watch that game at the time and I saw it was 5-0. And I thought, oh yes, probably a hat-trick from Solanke, 1 measly assist. So, fuck this game, dude.
Dan, you are continuing to have the season from hell, but I still believe you're ahead of Bucks. So even though he's not on the pod today, we can still rub it in his face that you and I are far and above doing better than him.
I'm one of those nerds that tracks my season by season, and I'm at the worst rank I've ever been at this point of the season.
Woof.
So it's not looking good.
Well, hopefully there's some new chips that will help you shoot up the leaderboard that we will discuss later. And I think have you used your triple captain chip already? I can't remember.
You know I have. I used it on Haaland in the single game week, so that's just another failure of this season.
Oh my. Well, you just got to keep fighting the good fight, as I think most managers would say to you. And I think I've been impressed with the rallying support from some of your beloved pups that follow you on social, like trying to make sure that you keep your head right and you got to keep trudging forward. It's a long marathon to sprint, and hopefully you can find your pace and run through the forest and howl at the moon at the end of Game Week 38.
Absolutely.
All right, let's jump to Mr. Raptor. How did you fare in Game Week 16?
It was the smallest green arrow I think I've ever had. It was about 10k places, and you might think, wow, you're at an incredibly good rank to have only moved 10k places. Not particularly. I'm up at about 360k. It was 54 points. I think, as Dan was sort of alluding to, it was just one of those where you had higher hopes because you looked at the fixtures and it was like every single player, regardless if you had a good or bad team even, but every player felt like they had a good fixture. I mean, for my team, I had 11 players playing at home. It looked like it was set up. I was genuinely thinking I might hit triple digits here quite comfortably. And then for the 3 premiums between them to score, I think it was 11 points after Palmer got that random bonus. But it's incredible. It's just not what you expect. So Yeah, I mean, the star of the show for me was Isak with the 11-pointer. He's done me so well recently. Cunha has been incredible since game week 7. When I jumped on him, he was about 1% owned at that point. So he's been brilliant for me. And people have been frustrated recently, but me less so because I had those few big scores from him at the start. And even Aït-Nouri as well. I had a 9-pointer and a 6-pointer from him around sort of 7 and 8. So the Wolves assets have annoyed me a little bit less because I at least had those points at the start. But yeah, I think the big disappointments for me were probably Trent, who I brought in this week, and I sold in Burmo to fund that, which was painful. Sanchez losing the clean sheet right at the death, and then João Pedro continuing to frustrate. But at the end of the day, it's a green arrow. Considering I started the season without Haaland for all of those goals, then I brought Haaland in when he decided to just turn into the worst striker in the Premier League. And then yeah, considering that horrible swing, I'm okay with my season so far.
Yeah, that late Chelsea clean sheet wipeout was brutal because I have Levi Colwill in my team as well, and I took out Boomer. So that was a massive swing. That was like 200k places at my rank. So yeah, that was disappointing.
Well, not to add insult to injury, but I was very excited as a holder of Boomo, and I end up on 59 points. I have really had a fantastic season. I'm sitting at 46k overall and had a 22% rank increase. So I rolled my transfer. I have 4 free transfers this week. So really looking at a prime spot to have one of my best finishes ever. But with that being said, have definitely gotten very lucky over the last couple of weeks. I was about to rip Boomo out of the squad for Trent and do that switch to either Enzo or Amad. And with the canceled matches, I've just been holding on to Boomo, and really just a player that has delivered over the past 2 game weeks after many have sold him. So very fortunate there. A rare captaincy blank for me. I think of the 3 hosts, excluding Ross, but between myself, Dan, and Bucks, I've been leading the way in captaincy points, and to get the 6-pointer from Palmer was very disappointing, especially since we've seen Brentford be so abysmal on the road. But all up, Isak, Cunha, 2 of the legends, Raya, Gabriel, all chipping in points. And then my biggest woes in my team were Aït-Nouri and Van Heck, who I don't know why the Van fuck I brought this guy in. I mean, good Lord, I could have gotten Hall or somebody else. And I just played it safe, just thinking that I wouldn't have to play him so often and just have him be my first defender. But yeah, that was definitely an error in my last couple of weeks. So he'll be ripped out of my team shortly as well. But all up 59 points and sitting in the top 46k. So proud of myself so far, but won't talk too much more about it because Dan gets pretty sick of me.
Yeah, I'm tired of your bragging. Yeah, move along.
Yeah, we'll bring up the bragging later when I discuss one of my 4 free transfers later on. And then just to highlight the fallen soldier, Bucks today, hard at work and missing this pod. He had 61 points and a very, very sizable green arrow. He had a big 15-point haul from Lewis Hall, and also owned Nico Jackson en route to some good returns. So he is still sitting behind Dan in the totem pole, lowest man on the totem pole, that is. So we'll continue to thrash his bad name in the mud until Christmas comes. And hopefully, Dan, you gotta fight him off, though. I'm a little worried now after this weekly performance.
Me too. He's catching up.
Yep. All right. Next up, just want to highlight the manager of the game week in our free-to-play Press Play Premiership League. This is a global league that we've had tons and tons of entries in, and the winners will get a free kit of their choice. So we're looking forward to sending that out to somebody internationally or domestically, maybe in the United States later on in the season. So I want to shout out Volodymyr Serhalev, who ends up with a very, very tidy score. I believe he had 81 points in his side, which is very much a huge bonus above the safety, 28 points above his own safety score, and had, wow, his defense. Imagine having this defense. Pickford with 8, Robinson with 6, Gavardiol with 7, Hall with 15. I mean, just absolutely flying. I think that totals Dan's entire game week amount of points, basically. So well done to him. He even capped Salah and has Bruno over the likes of Saka. So well done to him as he climbs into the top 200k overall. We're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss some of the happenings around the Premier League and introduce the assistant manager chip, which was revealed to a little bit of negative clamor around the FPL community. We'll be right back.
And we are back. So let's discuss this new chip. So I don't know about you two, but it confused the fuck out of me. I read these rules over and over and over again, and it took a while to really get used to what they were saying here. And I was kind of surprised that FPL went this route, because I know preseason we were discussing, are they going to add ball recoveries and things like that? But everyone was saying, now that would be too complicated for fantasy. They're not going to do something so complicated. And then they've added this crazy ass chip. So Russ, what is your initial reaction to this?
Yeah, so my initial reaction is this was a load of shit. I kind of like exploded on Twitter, which isn't something I would normally do, but I just had such a strong immediate reaction, which is this is crap. This is not what, like, the thing I love about FPL is the simplicity. And I've always said that, like, I don't like Champions League fantasy. I didn't really like the Euro and World Cup one. And it was mainly the automatic substitutions, but it was also the extra stuff for ball recoveries. I don't want to be tracking ball recoveries. I want to pick players that score assists and keep clean sheets. Like, for me, that the simplicity is wonderful. I even think sometimes the bonus points are overcomplicated, and we won't get into that today. But I just think that FPL is such an easy game to explain. Like, you want to get your work friend involved? Just join. Oh, by the way, there's these chips where your bench scores points, or you get 3 times captaincy. Like, the chips are so easily explained. I can literally explain it to my nan. My nan understands the triple captainship.
Oh, good on her.
And
Good on.
which is amazing, right? But can you imagine me trying to explain to my nan the Arseman chip? Like, it's just not going to happen. And this is my concern. And I guess it's more of a concern as a content creator who has a job around FPL, because I need to make sure that my audience understand it and engage with it. But I just think this puts off people, like, especially the more casual managers. What I will say on the flip side is, if you're an engaged manager, and if you're listening to this podcast, you obviously absolutely are, if you're engaged enough to at least listen to the content, then this will massively benefit you, because we were looking at it in sort of previous seasons. I think it was our friend FPL Focal looked at last year. The perfect time to play the chip last year was on Oliver Glasner, when it was in double game week 34, when Crystal Palace went on that incredible run. I think they had a slightly tricky double. It was the likes of Manchester United and Newcastle. But if you'd have played it in that perfect time, then you would have gained 67 points from the chip.
Wow.
Which just goes to show, like, how much upside this has. Because if you think about a bench boost, maybe 20 points you might gain from a bench boost. If you think about a triple captain, like, the maximum ever was on a double game week where we had Salah with like Norwich and Watford or something like that, and it was still only like 26 points. You're looking at like 3 times the potential value in this chip compared to others. So it's got some massive upside. So it can turn your season around, which is a really good thing. But equally, on the flip side, it can do the opposite, right? If you don't play it well, you might lose like 60 points to someone in your mini league, which feels like the swing is a little bit too big.
Yeah, and those for those who are living under a rock, I'm just going to read through some basic rules here about the chip. Again, we're very much hardcore addicts of FPL, so we're talking about it like everyone knows what it is. But for those who do not, it is called the Assistant Manager chip, and you will pick a Premier League manager for 3 consecutive game weeks. They will count towards your maximum player total per club. So if you're looking at Liverpool, you can only have Slot, Trent, and Salah in your team for those 3 consecutive weeks, if you're going to have him be the head of your assistant manager chip. And these funds have to come out of your total budget. So, for example, the bad clubs like a Wolves, their manager is likely going to be worth 0.5 million, and then all the way up to 1.5 million. So it's just so complicated. I'm going to keep reading a little bit from this this graphic from All About FPL, and they say if you have your assistant manager chip, you get 6 points for a win, 3 points for a draw, 1 point per goal scored, and a clean sheet is worth 2 points. With that being said, if you also take somebody to upset, you get an extra 10 points if your manager wins and the team is ranked at least 5 places higher. So that's what Ross was alluding to earlier, where if you have a team that's in 14th place and you upset Chelsea in a fixture, your manager will gain you at least 10 points. And then lastly, wow, you can even transfer these managers out in between game weeks, and those will cost you free transfers. So good Lord, this is very complicated. It's something that we will continue to discuss. And I know, like you said, Ross, as a content creator, it's your job to identify where you could possibly use this chip and use it to your advantage, because it's just OP. It makes no sense to me that they made it so much more overpowered compared to what you're likely getting off of a bench boost, which is, hey, if I get 12 points on a bench boost, it's like, yeah, it was pretty good in most years, right? And so it's very interesting that they went for something that, in my estimate, it's just not about fantasy. It's more about pick'em leagues, gambling. You're looking at market odds. These are all things that are, like, for me, completely separate of the individual performers that you spend so much of your time analyzing. And so I thought that was a little bit of a interesting thing to bring into the game. I know we're seeing other platforms like, again, those pick'em types of performances, where you're getting points for wins, losses, and draws, and those are getting popularity. But I kind of want to keep that separate from my FPL team. But
Yeah,
what do you think here, Dan? It's just so much to unpack. I don't even know what to do with myself.
yeah. I mean, I agree with Ross here. I think what's great about FPL is the simplicity of it. I feel like they're heading a bit too much towards like US football fantasy, which I know you love, Brian, but for me, as someone who doesn't watch it like intently, it's very complicated. The amount of points you score for everything, and I feel like they're kind of heading in that direction, which I don't like. Like, if I had my way, honestly, I would remove chips completely. Because there's just too much variance. You can have a great season picking all of the right players, and then get lucky with one triple captain or play this assistant manager chip and get kind of lucky, and it's like a 70-point swing, which is potentially like a million places. So for me, it takes out some of the skill. I know if you're really engaged, you can probably do well with this chip, but it can also go the other way as well. You could be on the end of really bad variants. So, I just don't like the additional variants that they're adding here.
All right, so I want to toss it over to Raptor. How would you advise a casual to implement this chip? Because I was thinking about that too. If I had explained this to somebody, they would just be, again, I did a terrible job just reading it right then and trying to comprehend what I was even saying. But I mean, I feel like so many folks who are more of the casual route, you just pick your favorite content creator and copy what they're doing. If you don't want to like spend all your time sifting through graphs and betting markets and schedule congestion and all that, like it's just a very bizarre thing to try and grow the game. Like, I think it's a detriment at this point. It's great for hardcore folks, but in terms of the global appeal, I just don't see this chip coming back next year in this iteration. I think it's just a little bit too much of a switch from, especially with everything they're trying an FPL challenge. I thought they might bring something over from that test lab into the game. This is like way out there. So curious what you would say to a casual fan and how to implement this.
Yeah, I mean, the rules are, you need to really look at the rules yourself and break them down, but you can simplify it. Basically, you just pick a team to back, and that is represented by the manager. And then if that team does well, then you earn points. That is the simplified version of it. And you will need to free up budget to do so. So that's the key thing here, is you'll just back a team, which is represented by the manager. You're not actually backing the manager, you're backing the team. And you need to free up at least 0.5 to activate the chip. However, there's so much more to it. As Dan was alluding to, you should start looking at market odds, clean sheet potentials, goal projections. And then it starts to get to a point where, because you're playing it for 3 consecutive game weeks, if you activate it in, say, game week 24, which is the first possible chance, you need to think by game week 26, which is in 3 game weeks, will the team that I want to back still be 5 places below the team that they're going up against? So it's so much more advanced than I'm even giving it credit for, if you want to think about it that much. But as is the case with everything in FPL, you don't have to. As Brian said, you can just copy your favorite content creator, or you just play it on whichever manager you want with some easy fixtures. I'm not going to get too nerdy now because I could be here for an hour and a half going through blanks and doubles, but we are projecting 3 double game weeks this season. 1 double game week is the Liverpool versus Everton postponement, which is expected actually to be game week 24. So this chip becomes available in 24, and the Liverpool-Everton double is expected to be in 24. Liverpool will play Bournemouth away and Everton away, and Everton will have Leicester at home and Liverpool at home. So immediately, you could just activate it in game week 24, as long as you've freed up some budget, of course. It will be probably 1.5 for slot, and I would say 1 million, maybe 0.5 for Deitch, and just play on one of those 2 managers, and then you transfer them out if you want to for sort of game week 25 and 26. So that's the first double game week, is 24. We'll have a double game week in 33. So you can play it for game weeks 31, 32, 33 is a nice possibility. And then finally, there's a double game week in 36. And I think this is going to be a really exciting time to play it, which is you play a game, it's 36, 37, 38. So you get that big double game week at the end of the season. And imagine that. Imagine you're 70 points behind your mini league leader and you slap the assistant manager chip down on game week 36 and you somehow claw back 70 points. Like that's the exciting use for it. But basically, if you're listening to this now and you're thinking this is so overly complicated, I don't want this. For now, you don't need to do anything. It's not available till game week 24. But around then, you need to start thinking about which double based on the chips that you have available do you want to play it in. And yeah, just listen out for the content and just see what becomes the popular strategy at that time.
That was eloquently said, and thank goodness we have a professional on to explain, his take on it. I think it's a very interesting position to be in. I feel like I saw some folks say like whatever your overall rank is, it's gonna have an asterisk next to it, and it doesn't count. It's not truly top 10K because of this bullshit. So we'll see what happens. But I think because so many managers will use it at different times, the rank and point totals are gonna be crazy. Like somebody who's gonna get 30 could get 20, 30 points in a given game week higher than another player having the same exact team. Like that's pretty wild. So more to come on that front, but I think let's pivot from here. We'll be tackling future opportunities when to use the chip, and after we digest it a bit more, I think game week 24, like we mentioned before, is the first time you can use it. So we'll discuss thoroughly, but you don't have to worry about it through the holidays. Just put that in a box for future New Year's resolutions, and then hopefully you'll do it then down the line. But moving forward, wanted to just hit on a few of the biggest matches and really just kind of tell the listeners about your personal watch list, Ross. I think that's what they would like to hear on what players that you're looking to target. And I think for Dan, we're going to start with Newcastle thrashing Leicester, and Hall and Isak both with big double-digit scores. Murphy adds a goal and more points, 2 goals, I believe, a brace. So where are we at with Newcastle? They seem to be such a up and down roller coaster team, but Isak, he really looks like the one to have in the middle.
Yeah, I feel like he's the asset we all thought he would be in game week 1 when most of us captained him. I don't own him currently, and it's just terrifying watching Newcastle every week because he looks involved in everything. He looks like he can haul every single game week. So I'll be very surprised if he's not in my team either this week or the week after, especially as his ownership climbs and his value climbs. I'm not too convinced by the Newcastle defense. This was against Leicester, so, we kind of expected a clean sheet, but they still look a little shaky, I feel. I think the time to jump on their defensive assets has probably passed. But Isak and Gordon are 2 assets I'm definitely looking at who I think could really deliver the points in the next few weeks. What about you, Russ? I think you own Isak, right? Yes, you do.
Yeah, I love Isak. I'm a big Isak fan. I'll say something controversial, though I don't think it is once you consider it. I think Isak is probably the best asset in the game if you take into account value. Because I think he's obviously a step away from the likes of Palmer, and I genuinely do, because he's definitely, like I said, a step away from Salah and Palmer, right? He's not quite that asset, mainly because he's a forward as well. And we know that midfielders are overpowered with the extra point for a goal and clean sheet. Is he that much lower than Saka? Probably not, based on underlying data, based on the fact he's on penalties, 90 minutes. His minutes are even better than people realise. People talk about his injury record. When he's available, he just plays 90 minutes consistently. Wilson's out for 2 months. So when you consider, where's he now, 8.7 million? So he's a solid like 2.5 million less than Palmer. I think he's probably the best asset in the game if you're looking at what you get for your money. And the thing that I've been so impressed by in recent weeks, if I just read out his expected assists without getting too nerdy, it's 0.36, 0.53, 0.22. So what Isak has added in recent weeks is he's extremely creative as well as having the goal threat. And a criticism I've even had of someone like a Mateus Cunha in the past is stop creating goals. I want you to score them. And I don't really want my players creating goals. I want you to be on the end of it because you get more points. But Isak's just like, I can score goals and create goals. He's got that incredible goal threat, but the way that he's linking that Newcastle attack, I genuinely can't think of anything you could possibly want more from an asset. And as Dan was saying, fixtures wise, I don't like it for the Newcastle defense, right? It's Aston Villa, United, Spurs after the Ipswich game, but Aston Villa, United, Spurs are great fixtures for those attackers. And then after that, they're going into Wolves, Bournemouth, Southampton, Fulham, Man City aren't even defending particularly well. Like up until 25, I just think Isak's such a good asset to have that I never normally advocate hits, but I'd even take just go out there and take a -4 and get him this week. I don't even care who you're selling at this stage, like Haaland, Jackson, Cunha. Like I just feel like Isak's that much better. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about his ownership. I wouldn't worry about missing points. There's nothing to suggest that Isak's going to particularly slow down anytime soon. But I think Anthony Gordon is an asset that's going under the radar massively. I think if you're sat there with the money to get him in, because he's at such an awkward price point for a lot of people. Like in my midfield, I've got Saka, Palmer, Salah, Rodgers, Enzo, and it's like I don't have that price point. Those that are sat there within Burma are probably thinking I kind of want to keep him now, but at the same time, a cheeky punt on a Gordon with those fixtures coming up, I don't mind it.
And another thing about Isak as well, because he's added that side to his game, like you said, he's really good for bonus points now too.
Exactly.
We've seen he's scored 1 goal in his last 3 games. He's also got the 2 bonus points in all 3 of those games. So 1 goal for him is effectively worth, 6 points. So yeah, I'm scared not owning him, and I agree that he's probably worth a hit. I think I'm going to take a hit for him. Little preview for my team this week.
Oh, wow. One of your very few hits this season, Dan, but I'd have to agree. I think just given the avenues of points from either open play, being on pens, and just when you watch him, you really enjoy the pace that he plays with. He's able to dribble in and out of defenders in the box, then slot home passes. Now, do I wish there was a player better than Jacob Murphy on the right, slotting home these goals on a regular basis? Obviously, he just braced, but he's not quite the talent that Gordon is on the left. That would be another feather in his cap. But yeah, he's just a fantastic player. And when he's healthy, you keep him in your team. I would say even past game week 25, just keep him in your team. He's going to trickle along and has that explosivity, which is something that we crave as FPL managers.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, because I don't do this enough on my channel, he's just a good footballer as well. Like, if you watch the Liverpool goal, because I was just looking through his stat and I was like, actually, his goal threat wasn't high in that Liverpool game, but that Thunder bastard from like 20 yards, you don't normally get a forward that has that in their locker. Like, a lot of the forwards that would look like a Chris Wood, he's great value, but he's not going to pluck that goal out from 20 yards against an incredibly good goalkeeper. So I think with Isak, not only does he have great data, the penalties, the minutes, the fixtures, but he's also an incredibly gifted footballer that can pull something out that others can't. So yeah, I love him.
Yeah, his spatial awareness is very impressive when you think about that goal versus VVD, and he was really just set on the type of move he was going to get when the pass was threaded in, and with utter confidence. And Van Dijk had no even reaction time to be able to close him down for that thunderbolt of a goal. So great player. I think he'll be worth the hit, Dan, especially if you keep him for quite some time. Moving on, a very bogey team this year has been Spurs. So I'm curious, do you rate any of their assets, Ross? I mean, this team competes well against some of the top teams, and then other game weeks they lay eggs, and it's really hard to pick from their midfielders. But lo and behold, James Maddison is, I believe, the 5th highest scoring midfielder in the game, and he's sometimes playing for 10 minutes in a few of these matches, and then other times he's getting 16-point hauls versus the likes of City. Truly bizarre. I mean, I really rate him as a player, but Ange doesn't quite like him in a game week in and game week out type of system. So what do we do with any Spurs players? Is it worth having them in our sides?
No, I don't like the fixtures. I don't like Spurs as a team, and I don't like the unpredictability as well, emotionally as much as anything. I don't like owning assets where I don't know what version of them is going to turn up, and that's what I like about someone like Isak or Salah or Palmer. It's like even if they don't get the points, they turn up and do a job, and they look like they have the opportunity to. I just don't like any of them. I mean, starting with Maddison, 51 minutes per game he's averaged since game week 8. So he's getting the points, and you could say then we'll just disregard it. It doesn't matter if he's not getting the minutes because he's doing it in the time that he's on the pitch. But I don't want an asset that I don't know if they're going to start, play 60, play 90. It's not for me, sadly, but he has been very impressive. Heung-min Son just isn't worth the money when you compare Isak, Salah, Palmer, Saka. You just can't squeeze Son in. I think Johnson is getting really, really poor minutes at the moment because Kulusevski is playing out on the right with Maddison through the centre. And then Solanke is just not it from an FPL perspective. Like if you look this season, apart from that 16 points, which by the way was 10 minutes against Villa, in which he did really well, the highest score he's got is 6 points. 6 points. Like he's not got a single 7 or 8 pointer. In fact, he has not picked up a single bonus point outside that one game. And he's got loads of returns. He's just terrible for bonus because Spurs score lots of goals and he often just chips in with 1 goal or 1 assist and he misses a lot of big chances. So basically, no. Spurs are a big no for me.
I agree. And the other thing about Tottenham is their price points are really awkward as well. Like if you look at Son, I like Son as an asset, but at 9.8 million, you can't really upgrade Mbumo to him or downgrade Saka, Salah, Palmer to him. So he's sitting at that 10 million range. You just can't get him in. Like, he would have been a great asset to have this week. I know the number one player in the world captained him this week, which was crazy.
You saw that I sent that to
Yeah.
the group chat. That was insane to be in the top 25 players across the world, not have Salah, and then go for the cap of Son. That's a stroke of genius there.
But even
Plays 45 minutes, insane.
exactly, even Son, he's coming off at halftime. He's coming off at 59 minutes every now and again. It's just they're
Oh
just
man,
too
I'll tell you
unpredictable.
what. I'll tell you what, Dan. It pains me to see two of my favorite players ever in De Bruyne and Son just be at the point in their careers where they can't play more than 60 minutes at a very high level. It's just the father time is undefeated, and it just pains me to see these previous FPL studs that would always be in contention for your teams to just be kind of irrelevant. And then also on top of that, very expensive. So those guys are basically chalk offs for the entire season until maybe double game weeks down the line. But there's just so much rotation with those guys. It's a bummer. Makes me just wish for years past when it comes to those top players.
On a bit of a side note, did you see that James Madison actually tweeted the official FPL account
Oh,
saying
fucking legend.
was
That is the banter we need. That is the banter we need during the holidays right there.
I think they removed it though, didn't they? They gave it to him and then they removed it again, I think is what happened. That's just
Typical
players,
FPL
players need to stay away from FPL, otherwise it's going to be a farce. I think.
All right, before we keep looking at some of the other matches, let's head to Wolves Corner with Dan and just give him about 60 seconds. That's something we do on the pod. 60 seconds, sometimes 120, for him to air his grievances against his Wolves. So, Dan, how are you feeling mentally right now with the current stability and instability of your team?
I mean, it's so tough. Not only is my FPL season going to crap, my actual team is shit as well. I don't know what's happened to us. Like, all of the players have lost their heads fighting at the end of the game. Cunha grabbing the glasses off the Ipswich security guard, whoever he was. Ait-Nouri having to be literally lifted up by Craig Dawson and carried off the field. I don't know what's happening. And now we've, of course, fired Gary O'Neill and we've hired Vitor Pereira, who honestly I don't know a lot about him, but I'm looking at his resume. It does not look good. He changes teams every season, it seems. I don't know what's going on. All I know is our ownership are just terrible. They don't care about the team. They don't care about the club or the fans. And it's been like that for a few seasons now, and we're really starting to see the effects of that. So I'm not a happy fan right now. I was quite confident that we would avoid relegation, but now I'm definitely nervous about that. I still think we can do it, purely because of how bad some of the other teams are. And I think Wolves, when they play as well as they can, are actually, a mid-table team. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's really just such a bad spell to have all these players just losing their shit and doing foolish thing, picking up red cards after the whistle blows, fighting with people. It's a bizarre moment. And like Ross, I also jumped on Ait-Nouri and Cunha pretty early, and that Cunha I've been very happy with, and I didn't have high expectations for Ait-Nouri, but getting the -2, I'm like, can't even get me a 0. It has to be a -2. Oh, kick right in the nuts. But better days ahead, hopefully, for you, Dan. But losing a match like that's not technically a must win, but when you look back on the season, if they get relegated, you are going to be fuming that they drop points.
Oh, for sure. Especially if you look at the fixtures coming up, we're getting that really difficult run at fixtures again. So yeah, it's not looking good. What do you think, Ross?
I was just going to say it's such terrible timing to keep O'Neill for all of the easy fixtures and then
Right.
bring in a new manager ahead of what is the most difficult fixture run you could possibly have in the Premier League. It's like, I know they're going to give him one game potentially, but he's going to have had like maybe 1 or 2 training sessions with the team if he's in for the weekend. So yeah, they should have hired him. They should have sacked O'Neill before the good fixture run if they knew that was what they were going to do.
Yeah, brutal. That's on management. That's on management, right? Like, you got to foresee where you might get a new manager bounce, and right now they're going to go into truly the Dragon's Den and get fried as a team.
He'll be in charge on Sunday. I'm confident. I'm pretty sure he's in England right now. It's all been finalized. He should take training tomorrow and Wednesday as we're recording. So it's looking rough.
All right, let's quickly also just highlight the chaos in the Liverpool Fulham draw at 2-2. captainers of Salah were nearly in the points, and we captainers of Palmer were very lucky and very fortunate to not see Salah continue his double-digit reign of terror across the FPL community. So what's going on with the Liverpool defense? I know, Ross, you brought in TA recently. I think Dan's had him for a long time. They're clearly without a few of their starters. And I'm definitely on the other side of the variance. Got lucky by holding on to Bumo and not going for TA because of those injuries. So curious, where you see this. Is it just a blip in the whole season, or is it something that they'll continue to face?
I think Kanate is a massive miss. I just think the way they progress the ball, the partnership he has with Van Dijk. I actually think Gomez has been okay since coming in, but that's the big miss for me, is that Kanate's been sensational. I also just think you have to apply the context of what their fixtures were in the opening 10 weeks when we were like, oh my God, they're the best defense ever. They had the fixtures to go alongside it. We were comparing them with Arsenal, who had like basically all of the teams in the top 10 in the opening 10 weeks. It wasn't a comparison. So I've been saying now since about game week 9 or 10 for me that Arsenal are still the best defence in the league and that Liverpool are the second best defence. And I think that shows right now. Like, Arsenal in recent weeks have been really doing well, and not just the clean sheets, but even the times they concede, it's like 0.3 XG they're conceding. So I don't have an issue with Liverpool defence. Like, I bought Trent last week and I expect them to still be top 2 or 3 defences in the league, but they are not as good as Arsenal. They will not keep the same number of clean sheets. And so you need the attacking returns from the likes of Trent and Van Dijk. It's one of the reasons I don't really think I would look to bring Van Dijk in. It's just mainly because if I'm going to pay that much, I either want to go all the way to Trent for the attacking threat, or I'd just go for a Gabriel or Timber because they're a better defence. So yeah, I still think Liverpool defence are really good, but I think you go all the way for Trent and you get that real attacking threat, or you just probably don't bother and just back Arsenal instead.
Yeah, right now I think I'm going to hold off until they get healthier and then we get more clarity on the future double game weeks. And again, between potentially using the assistant manager chip and going with a defender, I think that's the time that I'll be looking to bring them in. And the tough fixture against Spurs, I think they'll probably win, but it could be 4-1. And Spurs will likely get 1 goal, depending on what Jekyll or Hyde shows up that week. And then lastly, let's talk about Manchester United winning 2-1 versus Man City. What a changing of the tides in Manchester. So it's a great time to have Ross on, who is very involved with the club. And, we're seeing your mug all over the place on social media with the Devils. So tell us a little bit about your wave of emotions in the Amorin era.
Yeah, it's been quite something. I think we just needed a change. Like, it felt very stale under Ten Hag, and it was one of those. It was inevitable. The players had just, their heads had gone, and I think you can almost see that at Wolves as well. Like, it's not just is the manager performing and are the players playing well. It's the mentality and the feeling that you get around the club. So we needed the change, and I will say from the very first second of watching Man United under Amorim, there's just such a clear structure and philosophy. And managers use this buzzword philosophy all the time. And half the time, I think it's just to get the fans to buy into something because they say, I've got this philosophy. And you're always like, what is your philosophy? I don't actually know. With Amorim, it's very, very clear. And the structure is so clear. He wants the wing backs to be very wide. He wants the number 10s to come inside. He wants the players at the back to play on the ball. He's not scared to go along at the same time. Like, it works and it looks a lot better. So even in the games that we've not won, like Forest and Arsenal, it still looked so much more structured. And I would say the big thing I'm surprised about, because I didn't think it would be the case, is the defense looks really good. I thought under Amorim, what would happen is we'd start scoring goals for absolute fun and be beating teams like 5-3. We're still kind of struggling going forward a little bit. But if you look at the XG we conceded under Amorim, the defense is a lot more solid. So that was probably the big surprise for me, because I just thought we'd score goals, but we're still struggling a little bit, and the defense just looks pretty solid.
And what I really like about him as well is, like, he left out Rashford, he left out Garnacho because of their attitude. I feel like he's the only manager that's really had the balls to do that. So I really like that about him.
He's extremely brave. And another manager that is also brave is Maresca. And Maresca did that. He come in and said, this is my starting 11. The other 11 players that could technically get in, you're my second team. And he was very happy to say that. And yeah, I feel the same kind of vibe about Amorim. He's very clear on the players that he's impressed with, and he looks like he'll be loyal to them, which makes the likes of Amad, who is clearly in favour, even more likely to start because he clearly is trusted by the manager.
Yeah, let's double down on a few of their assets, such as Amad and also Bruno in terms of their outlook going forward. A mixed bag of fixtures, but I think the talent is there for those two to be relevant in FPL. So curious if you have any thoughts on bringing those folks in your team.
I think Bruno's still a better asset than Amad, and I think at his price he probably is just about value. My concern with Bruno is Isak, which sounds very strange, but assuming that you want to own those three premiums in and I'm not saying you have to, but Salah, Palmer, Saka, you probably can't get Bruno and Isak unless you're then sacrificing a lot elsewhere and you don't want sort of double Arsenal defense or Trent or Jackson as well. So you have to sacrifice somewhere. And I just think when Ahmad's performing at such a high level and he looks very good for minutes, I feel like I would rather, let's say, Amad and Jackson to something like Bruno and Strand Larsen or Welbeck. Like I just think that combo of Isak and Amad looks a little bit better right now. So I think Amad's
Good
the
call.
one to go for. And I just think that he's playing an advanced role. We spoke about Garnacho and Rashford were left at home. Like that's not a good sign. Very sad that this happened, but it's great for Amad's minutes that Mason Mount went off injured. And so really what you're looking at now is we basically only have 2 10s. We're not going to play Rashford and Garnacho on a consistent basis and Mount's injured. And Xerxes just not very good as the 10. I think he has to be a 9 really. You've only got Bruno and Amad because Anthony's been favoured as a right wing back at the moment. So Amad's which is just stupid. But anyway, Amad's minutes look supremely secure right now, which I didn't expect. He's playing well, passing the eye test. He's just brilliant. I would say probably if you've got 5.5 million, I think Amad's top of the list for me above Enzo and Rogers at the moment.
Great analysis right there. That's straight from a big fan and somebody who is watching all of their matches very closely. So we appreciate that insight. And I think when we're looking to transition money out of our teams and free up maybe, money to increase your attack and everything else, having those assets like Rogers, Enzo, who's just absolutely crushing it right now, and the likes of Amad is huge, right? You're able to easily pick one of those guys and just hope that they go on a little tear when you need them. But if not, having a player at 5.5 million or less as your first bench cover, especially with all these upcoming fixtures, we're going to have 3 game weeks in the next maybe a dozen days or so. And so that's going to, hurt managers from time to time when it comes to rotation. I know a couple weeks ago with Gabriel out and Greaves out, I fielded 10 men. And I thought I had a full playing team, so good to have those guys in the mix. All right, let's transition here and fast forward to just talk about a few of the matches coming up here, and look at game week 17 for players that are going to haul. And mainly, we're looking for those lopsided matches with 3-0s, 4-0s, etc. So Newcastle at Ipswich. This one again, like Dan said, he wants Isak in. I think Gordon is somebody as well who's underperformed comparatively to the opportunities that have been put in front of him, and is somebody that could go on a tear soon. I think he's been challenging a few of the goalkeepers more frequently and is on some of those set pieces. So any kind of initial read here? Does Ipswich score at home though, given their energy that they get from their crowd?
Yeah, Ipswich are difficult to read for me. For some reason, in the back of my head, I have this idea that when they're playing at home, they're a difficult fixture. I don't know how true that is. I don't tend to watch them as much.
I mean, they're the tractor boys, so who knows what they're up to.
But yeah, I still think like Ross said, getting Isak in even for a hit is a wise move, even because long term he's just a easy hold. But I'm not entirely confident this is a holdable game for him. I don't know why I have that impression. I could be completely wrong. It's just my gut feeling. But he will be in my team, so
Love it.
Don't listen to me.
Next up, I'm kind of curious what your read is on Everton, who are now, I believe, second for total clean sheets this season, and Deitch is just doing what he always does, parks the bus. We have Chelsea at Everton coming up. Some managers are even tripled up. I know FPL Harry, who has been on our podcast before, and I know you're quite good friends with him, Ross. I think he's tripled up on them with Enzo, Jackson, and Palmer. So what's your read of this game at Everton?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also tripled up, just not on the attack. So I've got Palmer, Enzo, and Sanchez for all of my sins. I think that Everton are they're a very good team and they're a very good defense under Deitch. I will just note, and this isn't just narrative, you can kind of see it in the data, they don't necessarily put up the fight that we expect against the big teams. And I know people point to the Arsenal game. Arsenal comfortably created enough chances in that game to win it. The scoreline flattered Everton slightly.
Yeah, they had like
And
1.6 XG, right? Like it was pretty
exactly.
fortunate for any Pickford owners to get that 8-pointer.
Exactly. And we know that Arsenal are in a rut at the moment a little bit in terms of creating chances from open play anyway. But I think Everton are a very, very, very good defense against equally difficult opposition. That's where we expect them to keep the clean sheets. Against the more difficult opposition, they do sometimes roll over a little bit. And I find it interesting, actually, and I was looking into the data earlier, both Chelsea and Parma are better away from home this season. So Chelsea are the second best attack in the league away from home after Liverpool, actually. They're both good. And Parma's data in terms of goal threat is double his XG away from home that it is at home this season. So a little bit of propaganda for the Chelsea attack is they're actually a very good attack away. I would expect this to be sort of a comfortable 2 or 3-0 win, but I'm not expecting them to score sort of 5 or 6 goals.
Yeah, and just to throw a wrench in the works, I saw a really interesting stat today where since the 1st of October, Everton have kept more clean sheets than any other team across the top 5 leagues in Europe. So they've kept more clean sheets than Real Madrid, AC Milan, Napoli, Bayern Munich, etc. That's a crazy stat. Like, you know, we had Pickford at the start of the season, and this is kind of the Pickford I was hoping for when I had him. He not only does he keep these clean sheets, he tends to get the bonus points and the save points when he keeps clean sheets. So I kind of like the Everton defense. I'm not saying they're going to win this game. I also think Chelsea are good enough to win this game. But for people like you, Brian, who had Mykolenko for so long, getting all these 10 points, 11 pointers, 12 pointers.
Oh, legend. I mean, I've only played him for like maybe 2 out of the 6 times that he's gotten a clean sheet, but I got 11 points off the bench from him a couple of game weeks ago, and things like that are what contribute to a lucky overall rank at the end of the season.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think the Everton defense, I think they're pretty strong, and I think they're finally getting back to the Everton that we saw at the end of last season with Sean Dyche. So
Yeah, I don't particularly want to watch any of their matches. Like they're pretty much a snooze fest. But I love opening the app and seeing a cheeky little 6-pointer from Mykolenko pop up here and there. So we'll see how they fare. I think the other matches we want to talk about is probably Liverpool at Tottenham. Is this a captaincy match for Mo Salah, or would you be going elsewhere this week? I'm very curious what Ross's plans are with his masterminding.
Yeah, I think the issue is Spurs are so unpredictable that even Postecoglou doesn't know what version of Spurs is going to turn up. So it's very difficult for us to guess. I will just say that we're expecting it to probably be Jed Spence at left back and Porro at right back. Jed Spence is a very decent defender, but I would say Udogie probably is stronger in that left back role because he's played it so much that Jed Spence hasn't. And I just wonder in a full 90. And the thing is, it's not like Jed Spence can be subbed off even. They've not really got the backup. So I just think 90 minutes of relentlessness from Mohamed Salah against Spence is going to be tough for him. It is his chance to impress, though, and he deserves the chance. So maybe he's got a point to prove here. But I fancy my chances of 90 minutes of Salah up against Spence personally. And it's not just Spence as well. It's the rest of that defense. Like Porro has been dropped twice in the last 3 weeks because he's not playing well. They've not got fit centre backs. It's probably going to be like Archie Gray and Dragerson unless they have someone back. It's a bit of a mess in that team at the moment.
Yeah, and I talk about this a lot on this podcast, but it's also the psychology of it for me. The fact that Spurs Liverpool is the very last game of the game week. Here in California, Ross, it's at 8:30 a.m. in the morning, so we're watching that while we're drinking our coffee and having our breakfast, or if you're Brian, beers.
So sometimes a Guinness, sometimes a Guinness.
Yeah, so having your captain play the last game of the game week just adds that psychology to me to want to captain Salah.
Yeah, it was funny this past week. I obviously being on Palmer and seeing that, you had the hope that Palmer was going to outscore Salah, but even when he blanked, I'm like, it wasn't so bad,
Exactly.
But hopefully there won't be a situation where somebody goes off on Saturday and then you are stuck with a blank on Sunday. That is a rough way to end the game week. Elsewhere, just want to talk about some assets. NFO at Brentford. So people who have Mbumo, maybe even the defenders of NFO. NFO is falling off a little bit defensively, or giving up a few more chances, but Milinkovic, the tall lad, keeps getting in and around the goals on set pieces, and Wood, very unfortunate not to get points. I was a big wood guy. That's right, Dan. I said it. A big wood guy for a number of game weeks, which helped propel me up the ranks. And then I sold him for João Pedro. But now I'm in a position where, man, is he the best replacement for Cunha if he gets banned? What are your thoughts there? And Dan, have you seen or heard anything else about the Cunha potential ban?
Well, I heard the same thing that I think Ross heard as well, is that it's very likely he does get banned, but I think they can appeal it so they can delay that decision so that he can play the Leicester game. Now, I'm not sure that's wise because I personally think we can beat Leicester without Cunha. I think it's more important to have Cunha for the difficult fixtures. But anyway, I think just wait for news. I wouldn't sell him yet, and if you do hear that he is going to play that game, I think he's a hold.
Yeah, I think so. Basically, if they appeal it, there's no chance they get a hearing. If they appeal it, there needs to be a hearing, and there's no chance of a hearing between Thursday and the game. But yeah, I think the terminology is a frivolous appeal. So if they appeal it, and it's very clear that the reason they've appealed it is because they're trying to delay the ban, then he could be slapped with an extra sort of 3 or 4 games on that ban, which is obviously terrible news for Wolves. The best case scenario for them is they appeal it, he plays the Leicester game, and then it isn't classed as a frivolous appeal. And they've got some, I don't know what the justification would be, maybe based on previous precedents of like Jackson when he slapped the person in the face and didn't get a ban. Maybe if they go based off that. So I think best case scenario for them is that they use previous precedents, they appeal the ban, he plays Leicester, and it doesn't extend, which is what is looking like a 5-game ban. But I understand the justification because it is a 6-point match. If like Wolves are in a relegation battle now, it's not just gaining 3 points. You're taking 3 points off probably a team that are battling with you. So I get it.
That's good.
But as Dan's saying, surely you back yourselves enough to win that game, and then you want Cunha back for the more difficult fixtures.
Ross, as an American, I'm curious, why is there so much face touching in world football? There's just so much face mushing, and there's kissing of men and bald heads and all kinds of things. It was bizarre to me, especially the things happening after the whistle's blown. What the fuck is going on around here with some of these yellow cards and random run-ins being bubbled up?
It's really strange. I mean, I used to play professional football at an academy level, and the things people would do when the ref isn't looking to just put you off, like grab certain parts of you and prod you, and then like you don't want to go near that player because they're sort of touching. And I think that's sort of the perspective. It's like that evolutionary like need to be the alpha male. But yeah, I don't know what's happening at Wolves though, because they've lost their minds over there.
Yeah, that's actually a shout to Dan's favorite moment of the season where Mosquera just put the finger straight up the bum.
That's the start of all of this. That's the start of
a lot.
Oh my goodness, very bizarre.
Yeah, just going back to that, I think just wait for news. But I think if Cunha is going to play against Leicester, it's a definite hold. I personally don't think they should appeal it. The evidence is right there in HD. He grabs the guy's face, he pulls his glasses off. I don't think they have anything to stand on with an appeal there, personally. I would prefer to have him play the likes of Man United and Spurs and Newcastle, who I think Wolves can beat if they play their best and have Cunha. So I don't know how I feel about this.
I'm glad you're still an optimist, Dan. That's the view you need to take for your the rest of your FPL season too, because it's one of those where, oh man, their defense is just so poor right now, and that's what, you know, I back Cunha grabbing a Golazo here and there and hopefully trickling in 6 to 9 points. Like I think he's still actually a pretty decent FPL option even with those fixtures coming up, but the defense is so weak. So hopefully some better vibes will come through the club with the new manager. But with that being said, I think we are going to wrap up this section and we're going to come back with our FPL community questions. We'll be right back. All right, it's time for the mailbag. Thank you to all of those who have engaged with us. And I have to admit, this is probably the longest list of questions we've gotten in about a year because we have the legendary Raptor on with us. So I think let's take a look here. And I think first question is from @chefman7979, aka David. He was asking about Cunha and the Leicester match. And if he is banned, who's the best player to replace him with? He has Isak and Jackson already. Is it Wood, João Pedro, Mateta, Raul, somebody else? So curious on your thoughts and actually your potential plans if he is banned, Mr. Raptor.
Yeah, they all stink, the forwards, really, outside of Isak and Jackson. This is the concern, is that I don't want Cunha to be banned for this very reason. I think the issue is a lot of the forwards that I would want to target don't have a great entry point right this second. So the big one for me that I've just got a really good gut feeling about is Mateta. I think Palace run an upward trajectory. He's got the penalties. Apart from when he was subbed in the 59th minute this week, which I think is in preparation for their cup tie, he's played 90 minutes, something like 7 or 8 games in a row. The underlying data is relatively strong. I think Mateta would be my ideal player, but it's Arsenal this week, and that's not an ideal entry point. So I think if we're looking like right this second, it's probably Chris Wood, because what do you want? You want good minutes, you want penalties, you want okay fixtures, you want a talisman, you want someone that actually scores goals as well. And Chris Wood's that guy. I'd love to say Raul Jimenez, like I really truly would, but the minutes put me off. Like he's going to be benched in one of the next 4 games. Ideally, he gets the Southampton game, is benched midweek against Chelsea, which would be wonderful because you probably wouldn't want to play him anyway. And then he plays the rest. But Menees come off the bench, scored the goal. I just think they're all terrible. I think if Cunha is banned for this game, which I'm fingers crossed hoping he isn't, I'll go Wood. I think if Cunha plays and I make the move next week, I'll probably go for Mateta.
Yeah, I like that shout. I mean, out of those assets, my favorite is Raul Jimenez. But like you said, it's the minutes. That's the problem. Because if you look at their fixtures, like if he plays the Southampton at home, Bournemouth at home, Ipswich at home, Leicester away, you've got an amazing set of fixtures there. But Muniz can come in at any point. And I feel like Raul Jimenez, because of how well he did against Liverpool, he's likely to play the more difficult games like Chelsea away. And then you're going to get Muniz playing the Southampton at home game. You just can't call it. And even if Raul does start, he tends to come off around the 60th, 70th minute. I'm still looking at him just because I feel 20 minutes against Southampton, he's still got potential to get a haul, and he's only 5.5 million. It's not like we're getting hauls from other assets around that price. I've had João Pedro for 3 weeks and he's done shit. So, we've had our defenses delivering 0 points, 1 points, 2 points every single week. So having one asset who's a bit of a minutes risk alongside Isak and Jackson is fine for me.
Good shout there. All right, next question is from @FPL Paz. He wants to ask, any interest in Palace assets soon? So obviously Mateta is a top shout, and with Nketiah also just not really finding his place in the team after transferring there from Arsenal. Curious how we're looking at the likes of Sarr, Eze, and defenders, because for me, Munoz is somebody that will definitely be in my side. I'm actually kind of reverting to my game week 1 starting defense where I had like Trent, Gabriel, Hall, Munoz, like I had all those guys, and of course Barco, that fucking guy. But yeah, I think the likes of Munoz right now is kind of what I was expecting him to come up with early doors in the FPL season. So what are your thoughts there, Dan? Especially, I think Eze is always tempting, but he hasn't really delivered the goods yet this season.
Yeah, I really like Munoz because he's only 4.7 million. If you look at his XGI in the past few game weeks, it's over 2, which is just insane. And because I know Glasner got interviewed and he said what they really missed at the start of the season was that relationship between Elise and Munoz. And they've really missed that relationship, but now he's developing it with Sarr. And we've really seen it come to fruition the past few weeks. So I think Muniz is my favourite option at Palace right now. I know he's suspended for the next game. That personally wouldn't put me off bringing him in if you have really decent bench cover, because I feel like his price is going to continue to rise. And then he has the likes of Bournemouth away, Southampton at home, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford. A great set of fixtures, and you can hold him all the way until I'm seeing like game week 30, He's a long-term hold. So I think he's my favourite option. Eze, if he does show what he can do, the asset we thought he would be at the start of the season, and I like him a lot. But again, he's that awkward price for me. He's like, what, 6.6 million, something like that?
Yeah, he's
Too
basically
awkward.
If you have Mbumo still in your team where you could easily reach to him. But I think we know Mbumo is on pens, and that's something we're a bit unclear of right now between Mateta and Eze. So they could do the every other type of attempt, or see who gets brought down in the box to see who leads the penalty taking duties. But I think there will be one of these Crystal Palace lads in my team soon enough, and then we'll see if they can regain their form and win a few of these matches after a slow start to the season. Next up, want to bring up @Barrister FPL's question, aka Jeremy. He's looking at Ran 8 Nuri to Hall. Is that a move, or is it something that he should be looking at other defenders under 5 million and not chase the points? So I know we talked about the Newcastle defense earlier. Are there any other assets outside of Munoz as well that we like under 5 million, Ross?
I think what you really need to do is sit down with your current defense and work out when you need a defender. I think asking for advice on a cheap defender, it's too personal to your own team, unless you're telling me you need that cheap defender to start every single week, in which case I think but hands down the best option is Anthony Robinson. Like, I think if you need a defender every single week, he's the guy, because the run of fixtures is absolutely outrageous for Fulham, and they are top 8 for non-penalty expected goals conceded this season. So they're a good defense. He's got 6 assists this season and great fixtures. But if you need a defender this week and then one in 21 and 22, then Lewis Hall's fantastic. Like, if you don't really need him in 18, 19, 20, then go for it, because it's a great entry point this week. Ipswich aren't scoring tons of goals. He's then got a really nice run of fixtures from 21 onwards. Great. And I equally think, like, Bournemouth defense, I really like Howson. I really like Kirkes. I really still like Colwell as well. Again, another player that you can play most weeks. There are tons of cheap defenders, but it really depends when you need them. I think what we have seen recently with Ait Nouri is you want a defender that has attacking threat and clean sheet potential. It's not good enough to have one or the other. That would be my concern with Colwell, is that he's really reliant on clean sheets. My concern with Ait Nouri was that he was so reliant on attacking returns. So that's why I like Robinson and Kirkes as probably my 2 top options, along with Lewis Hall, because they have clean sheet and attacking threat.
Very nice. Very nice. I think the allure with Hall is being on a few of those set pieces as well, and just knowing that Newcastle have the talent up front to convert goals and convert those chances. That's one thing where I'm like not as sure about Fulham and how many goals. Like, they consistently score a goal or 2 goals, but they're not going to be thrashing teams 5-0, whereas Newcastle on their best day, especially in front of their home crowds, it gives you that ceiling that you can chase. Otherwise, they concede once or twice, but he chips in with a 4 or 5 pointer. That's also a good spot to be in. So I can't fault anybody going for any of those kind of defenders. I personally have Van Heck, and I can't wait to fuck him off out of my team and boot him into the sun. Like, he's been pissing me off. I don't know how I fell back into this Brighton trap, and Dan knows more than anyone. I despise Brighton. They've just been so up and down as a FPL team, and then fleecing the Chelsea Blues, and then hearing Bucks complain about it every season on all their failed assets and stuff like that. But all right, enough of a rant from me. Let's go on to at Bangla_FPL, which mid-price mid to get between Iwobi, Eze, Sar, Enzo, Amad. What's the best order of the assets, and who's like in the next 5 game weeks is a player that's going to emerge that we could maybe move on the likes of Semenyo or Rogers, who are falling off a little bit from their production?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what you value in FPL. Like, I am someone that values routes to points, and I value good minutes. So I brought in Enzo last week because when I looked at what he had, he's playing for, in my opinion, arguably top 2 attacks in the league, maybe even the best attack in the league at the moment in Chelsea. He's taking all in-swinging set pieces from the left-hand side, so corners and free kicks. He's got decent goal threat and assist threat. He's got a fantastic strike on him from outside the box. He's got a great eye for a pass. So I looked at everything that Enzo has, and he's got really good minutes because he's the club captain in the absence of Reece James. So for me, that's what I value. However, if you're someone that values a ceiling, for me, Enzo doesn't have a particularly high ceiling, right? I can't foresee him on many occasions getting multiple attacking returns. If you look at Sarr, Amad, I wouldn't say Iwobi, but Sarr and Amad in particular, they've got a high ceiling because they're playing so much closer to goal. They are real goal threats, and they showed that last week. So if you're like, because for me, Amad's minutes probably aren't quite as good as Enzo's, and he's not got as many routes to points because he doesn't take set pieces, but he's got that raw goal threat. Equally, if you're just looking for someone that has insanely good minutes and insanely good fixtures, then Iwobi's your guy, because the fixtures are perfect. Come up, gets 90 minutes basically every week. So I feel like you need to think about your own management style and what you value. For me, though, if you want my just general opinion and I'm not looking at your own management style, I would say Amad would be top of the list at that cheaper price. I would then say Enzo, then Iwobi, then Rogers, Sarr. But I would still have it as Amad, Enzo, Iwobi as my top 3 at the moment.
Love it. I can't disagree with any of that.
We're just lucky that we have a lot of options in those price
Yeah.
brackets to have as your likely 8th attacker. normal seasons when Holland would be a little bit cheaper and you'd probably look to be playing that player every single week. But right now we're blessed with choice in that price range. And it's, I think, adding a lot of variance to this season to see where you can, win in the margins, especially with the template really focused on those 3 premiums right now. So if you can find one of those 5 to 6 million guys that is a differential as well. And I think, I've been fading Rodgers for last maybe 6 game weeks now, and he's had a few returns, but I think he's starting to lose a bit of steam. Moving on to somebody like Amad is probably going to pay dividends for many managers.
All right, next up, we have a couple of questions about the assistant manager chip. So, first of all, at Holdercon asks, when do you feel like we should start planning for this new chip? We know it's going to be available in game week 24, but at what point do you advise people to really start thinking about saving those funds ready to play it?
Yeah, I think early right now, you just do you have the triple captainship available? And if you do you want to play that in Salah on Salah in 24? If your answer to either of those is no, right? If you don't have the chip or you just don't want to play it on Salah in 24, then I think arguably your best opportunity might be in double game week 24. So you then need to think about either freeing up a Liverpool slot if you've got 3 already for Arna slot, and you also need to think about budget as well. So I would say 22, so the start of January. Have a lovely holiday, have a lovely Christmas, enjoy the break, and then early Jan start thinking, do I need to start freeing up money? What I would just quickly say is I know a lot of people are like, I need to free up money like 10 weeks in advance. No, free up the money when you think you're going to play it, because there's no point being sat there for 6 weeks with 1.5 million in the bank. So I would start planning around game week 21, 22.
Yeah, it is interesting too, the ramifications of your team value. Like right now, my team is at like 104.5, which is quite high. And other teams that have less are going to be really pinching for money when it comes to shelling out another 1.5 for somebody like Slot or Arteta. So that part is interesting. And I also would really place importance on where you can hopefully roll your transfers and have some stacked up, because like you were saying before, if there's an opportunity to go for Dyche in the double game week and then maybe move him on to somebody else, that could really actually pay off. And that transfer, which would normally be 4, if you can hit 12 points on that move, that's big time and you'll really fly up the ranks. So I would definitely want to be thinking about, when you do find the time that you're going to play the chip, also have at least 2 free transfers in the bag, and then even more to also make other moves to impact your team.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I feel like just don't worry about the chip for now, but do think about trying to save free transfers as and when you can, so you have them banked up. I mean, there's no point really even thinking about who you're going to play the assistant manager chip on, especially if your strategy is to go for these teams that can get the extra points for the teams that are 5 places above them. The table is so congested right now, it's going to change drastically over the Christmas period. So you might be thinking about playing it on a manager right now, and they might end up be higher up the table when you actually plan on playing it. So I don't like that volatility of the chip for planning.
All right, so next up, we have a question from at FPL Theorist. He wants to know, is it important to have a decent 4th defender, or could you go with 2 4.0s if your starters are TAA, Gabriel, and Saliba? So again, we've mentioned the fixture congestion coming up, but what are your thoughts? Would you always like having at least a 4th defender able to sub in when your top guys get injured?
Yeah, my answer to that question is no, you don't need a decent defender, but you need a nailed-on defender that has something about them. So I just think you've got absolute gems in Anderson and Howson at 4.2 and 4.3. So yeah, don't overspend. Like, you're never going to bench Trent, Gabriel, or Saliba. And if they ever are likely to miss out on a consistent basis, then you transfer them out anyway. So yeah, I wouldn't overspend. I would just make your 4th and maybe 5th midfielder Anderson and Howson. And then you've only spent 0.5 extra million on those 2 defenders. So yeah, spend as little as you can, but make sure that you've got a bit of cover, because you might even need it for your attackers as well. You never know.
Yeah, it's a fair shout there. And Dan knows that I've been preaching about minimizing defensive transfers as much as possible. And so I think I've only made 3 defender transfers all season. And one of those was to rip out TAA and get more funds into my attack. But I think that's something where, especially when you eventually wildcard 2, like, make sure that you have those cheap guys. And Anderson is a gift. I think he's got attacking potential, and when he's healthy for a Fulham team, he's going to be starting. He often captained the Crystal Palace, I believe, in the past too. So he's just a player that I would love to have on my bench moving forward. But the Liverpool and Arsenal defenses are just so much better than the rest of the league when healthy, of course. But I think that's a really great trio of defenders to have if you're a FPL theorist.
Okay, next up, at my Cayman fan, aka Matt, asks, Ross, would you consider picking any Manchester United defenders right now? Because they've been keeping a few clean sheets, and I know you alluded to it earlier that their defense is better under Amorin. So how do you feel about that?
I would love to, and I think it's worth investing our defense at some point. But at the moment, Amorim is in an experimentation phase. He doesn't know what his best defense is. And even De Ligt, who I think has started every game under Amorim, which is great, he keeps getting these early subs. And they are sometimes right on that 60-minute mark. And it's a bit worrying. He seems to sub off his centre-backs and on his centre-backs quite a lot. I mean, the standout for me is probably Harry Maguire, as funny as that might sound, because we know how incredible he is in the air. Since coming back, like the couple of little appearances we've seen from him have been really good. He was so good in the City game. Only 4.9 million. The thing is, I'd just rather someone like Kirkes or Robinson. Like Man United don't have, like if Maguire was like 4.2, 4.3, I'd say, do you know what, that's worth a punt. But basically, I think Man United will keep a lot more clean sheets under Amorim. We look very solid. But in this experimentation phase, I'd probably give it another 5 or 6 weeks till you start looking at United defense.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there as well. Just thinking about the continuity and the rapport that you usually have to have in the back line, where you're using all your communication tools and having cover behind you. And when you're chopping and changing the team, it just leads to a few mistakes. And I hate when you have one of those goals just get passed to the other players pressing number 9 and they slide it home. And then you're just like, what the F is going on around here? So I would say similarly, it's a wait and see, but down the line, they could be priced to buy. Next up, we have a question from Tora de Corsa, and they want to know about their thoughts on acquiring a player like Archer or a very cheap forward and then perma-benching him so they could afford the likes of Holland and some of the other premiums. So what are your thoughts just on structure right now? We've seen that with the BPS changes that a lot of forwards, if they score, they're getting 8 or 9 pointers, except for Solanke, of course. But all the other forwards in that cheap bracket seem to be delivering those 8 and 9 pointers. So is 3-4-3 really just the way to go this season?
I think the key thing for me for structure is flexibility. And I guess in a position where you own Haaland and the 3 premiums, you would be fine. So I guess it's not a bad position to be in. My concern just looking at that question is like, do you not want to own Isak and or Jackson? And for me, I just come back to I would rather have Isak and what is like over 6 million in the bank on top of if you'd had Haaland. For me, I think we're at a point now with Haaland where if you own Haaland, you have to captain him every week. So if you think that Haaland is the best captain for 3 of the next 5, then I would absolutely go for it and be in that structure. Otherwise, I just don't like, what's the value in owning an almost 15 million asset that you're not even captaining every week? It's just not there. So yeah, I don't mind the structure. And as you say, Brian, I think 3-4-3 is probably the one. I just think that I think you want a fluid 3-5-2, 3-4-3 where you've got a really cheap fifth mid of Enzo or Amad, and then you've got 3 playable forwards. I wouldn't get yourself into a situation over December and January where you've got someone like Stewart or Archer on the bench. I just think you're asking for trouble.
Let me ask in addition to that question, do you feel like you should have a plan to get Haaland back in just in case the next couple of games he gets like a couple of hat tricks again? Or do you feel like that's not necessary?
No, I have absolutely zero intentions to get Haaland in. The reason I say that is if Haaland gets a hat trick, it doesn't even matter, assuming that Salah does okay, because you don't need Salah to even match Haaland. You need Salah to get close, and the rest of the funds that you've got available. And this is the whole point of why I started the season without Haaland. So yeah, I would have absolutely no plan. I think the only way I would buy Haaland is if one of Saka, Palmer, or Salah get injured, and that is my plan. If one of them get injured, then yeah, I'll think about it. But the thing is, the only way to do it in most of our teams is then selling Isak. I don't want to sell Isak, even for Haaland. So no, I don't think you need a plan. And the thing is, he's so lowly owned now. He's 3% in the top 10K. At my rank, he was 9%. He's so lowly
Wow.
owned. If he gets back-to-back hat tricks, it doesn't even affect your rank particularly. So there is upside there, but I don't think you need a plan though.
It would almost be better if he did start getting a couple of hat tricks, because a lot of the more casual players will be rushing to get him back in and messing up
Exactly.
their team and taking hits left, right, and center. And us more patient managers will not have him. So maybe it'll actually help us if he does that.
Exactly. And the thing is, the fixtures aren't great beyond 22. So they have, yeah, Everton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, Ipswich. But by the time he's got a couple of hat tricks in there, well, then after that, he's got Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool, Spurs, Forest. That's a rough run of fixtures right there. So by the time you start to think about using loads of transfers to bring him in, it's tough. And remember, we've got double game week 24 and the assistant manager chip around game week 24, right? So I just don't see a world in which a valuable use of your transfers is using 3 or 4 to restructure to get Haaland back in, to then potentially use 3 or 4 to then move him back out and spread the funds. You're looking at maybe as many as 6 to 8 transfers to do that, just to own Haaland, who even if he scores, still probably isn't worth the money. I just can't see it.
Quite a 180 from the start of the season, that's for sure. You were a first mover, a first adopter, and unfortunately got punished for those opening game weeks. But the truth has been brought to the forefront here in the FPL community, and that has to be teams without Haaland. One other follow-up question I had, just thinking about the kind of 3-5-2, 3-4-3. You know, when you're looking at João Pedro and Wood and Raul Jimenez, you know, all those guys are on pens. How do you really look at the fixtures and be like, all right, I'm going to play Enzo Fernandez in this one over João Pedro, or Amad over João Pedro, who we just know you could fall ass backwards into one of those pens, and that 9-pointer is just so comforting. So I'm just kind of curious, like, do you have any plans that you would be rotating your fifth mid in, that cheap guy, over somebody who's on pens in your front line?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have like a rough percentage in my mind of how much better the fixture would have to be for a non-penalty taker, which for me is like 60-40. So I think if the fixture is relatively close, and even if the fixture is slightly trickier for the penalty taker, I just play the penalty taker. But if I think there's like a real standout fixture, like let's say, I don't know, I had Enzo against, I don't know, like Leicester at home, and João Pedro had like Villa away, I'd probably bench João Pedro there because I think the fixture is that good for Enzo. But if Enzo had like Fulham away and João Pedro had Aston Villa away, then I think they're close enough at that point that you just back the penalty taker. I also think expected minutes are arguably even more important than penalties for me. So I would come back to like João Pedro at the moment. His ex-mins might not be as strong. So it's not only the fixture, it's also 70 minutes of João Pedro versus probably 90 of Enzo. But yeah, I love penalty takers. And there haven't been as many penalties this season, or they've started to creep in a little bit more recently. But it's just the variance. Like you could just get, like we saw with Cliver getting 3 penalties in a week. He didn't even have a good game outside of that. Like you won't get that a lot, but I just think back penalty takers where you can.
Yeah, fair shout. I think also earlier in the year, we saw a lot of people bench Bruno for Morgan Rogers or vice versa. And it's one of those calls where you're really trying to figure out, you know, who's the best to play. My mantra is like, start your studs, right? And like when you have somebody that you're investing 8.5 million into, like Bruno, like I just always kind of lean that way. You're on penalties and more avenues than playing somebody like Rogers, who might have a good fixture versus open play. But that's the fun of everyone running their own teams and making their own decisions. So we'll see how we continue to move up the ranks and hopefully back ourselves. Just back yourself, right? Like that's the most fun part of the game. You want to have your own decision tree made up and go with your gut choices and what you're seeing in the eye test plus the data. So last question here is from friend of the show, Connor, aka at FPL_Hunt. He wants to know, how often do you think you ignore your own FPL advice? Is there a psychological reason for this? So I think that's a very interesting question for you, having so many different avenues and conversations about FPL and creating videos, having a podcast. So really curious your thoughts here.
I need to be careful here because you'll get me talking for hours about psychology. The first is my favorite cognitive bias. Is called the bias blind spot, which is basically, as humans, we can't spot cognitive biases and fallacious thinking in ourselves. Like we can't spot where we've made a mistake almost. So I might not even realize that I'm making the mistakes. I might not even realize that I'm directly going against my own advice, is the first thing to note. And I just think that we're incredibly stubborn, and we're quite emotional as well. And I always talk about the idea of, it's very easy to give advice because you're not emotionally invested in that person's situation. So if Dan comes to me and says, I've got this benching decision, who do I start? I'm not enveloped in that in my own mind. Like I'm not invested. Like if I get it wrong, it doesn't affect me. So I feel like you can give objectively better advice when you don't have that emotional connection to the decision. Whereas then when you have the actual decision to make, like it's very easy for me to sit there and say, I'd take a -4 for Isaac. I'm not in that position. So I don't have to think about what that would be like to actually do it. So I think that's the key difference is that I can give emotionless advice to other people because I'm not invested in their team. But then when it comes to me, I've got all of these emotional biases coming in because it matters to me and I'm invested. So I think quite often I probably ignore my own advice and probably to my detriment. I think if I followed my advice, I'd probably do quite well because I back my advice in FPL, but it's not always that easy. And I also think we're moving to a point now with things like FPL review and algorithms and market odds of like trying to be like optimal managers constantly. That's not why we play the game. We don't play the game to play optimally every single time. So I feel like if you ignore your own advice and you play a bit suboptimally and you have a bit of fun with it, it doesn't matter. Like not every decision has to be perfect. And I kind of like that raw natural element of making an absolute cock up and going, yep, I made a mistake there. It makes me feel a little bit human again. So yeah, but I definitely ignore my own advice all the time.
So how much better of a rank would you have if you ignored your own advice from time to time?
If I took my own advice every single week, I'd be first in the world because I'm fantastic
Boom.
at giving advice.
There it is. There it is. Love that confidence. Love that confidence. All right. That is the end of our mailbag section. We thank everyone for engaging with us on social and for just helping produce the pod every week. So please continue to do so. And now we're going to take our final break and come back with our transfer plans and captaincy shouts. All right, Dan, shout it from the rooftops, howl at the moon. It's time for transfer plans and captaincy shouts. What do you got for me, lad? What are you rocking with?
So yeah, I have one free transfer, and I think I only have 0.2 million in the bank, and I do not own Isaac. And I really want Isaac, as we've talked about on this podcast. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to take a hit for him. You know, the good thing about being around the 1 million rank is, you know, you don't have those fears of, yeah, you just go for it. You just have a bit more fun. I'm actually enjoying this season more than last season when I was around the top 10K, because that was just fucking stressful. Like every bad decision, you were dropping rank like 40,000 places. Now, if I make a bad decision, I don't know, I'll go from 1 million to 1.2 million. No big deal. But I really want Isaac in my team because I like watching Newcastle. Like I love him as a player. I think I agree, he's one of the best assets in the game right now. So yeah, I think I'm going to take out Solanke for Isaac. Because I'm just tired of Solanke. Even when they win 5-0, he gets one fucking assist. So
lucky assist at that.
Yeah. So I'm tired of him in my team. I'm tired of him playing like a DM role. So Isaac's coming in for Solanke. So I just need to figure out how to free up funds to get him. I might just take the punt on Raul Jimenez, even though I know his minutes are really iffy. I know he might not start this Southampton game. I might just take the risk and just hope I get Hall there, hope I get 1 goal, maybe 2 goals if he starts. And if I see that he's lost his place and his minutes are getting worse and worse, I'll just bench him and move him on later on. Because
so are you taking out to get Raul Jimenez? Sorry, just what's your front line at the moment? Like what would the transfers be?
My front line currently is Solanke, Wisa, and João Pedro. Now, I like Wisa as an option. However, Brentford's fixtures coming up are really, really rough.
Big turn coming up.
He isn't getting enough hauls for me. Like we said earlier, Isaac has the potential to get 11 points, 12 points, 15 points every single game. I just don't feel that from Wisa. And his minutes are also not 90 minutes every game like they used to be. We're seeing him get pulled off a little bit earlier than usual. So I rate Isaac that highly that I'm going to take a hit for him and bring in a minute's risk to afford him. Because that will give me Isaac, Palmer, Salah, Saka, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and double Arsenal defense. So I feel like I have the core of the best 11 right there. So having the odd minutes risk is no big deal to me. I'm only getting 1 points, 2 points from these guys anyway.
Yeah, all fair. I think, especially at your rank, it's like, it's a little bit easier to take on that hit to chase the upside and push towards 500K, 250K, 100K. So those are the types of things you can do. And with Isak, he's a walking double-digit hauler. Like the way that he's creating. So I don't mind that at all.
Yeah, no, I was looking at
Fulham's fixtures are so good, and of course you would go back to the well from all your nostalgic times with Raul.
Yeah. But I was looking at my plans for the next 10 game weeks, and we're gonna get injuries for sure. It's just gonna happen. It's happened to me all season. But assuming we don't get any injuries, my team wouldn't need a transfer for a long time.
Oh my God, I've heard this every single fucking episode this season, and you keep blaming your injury risk on why you're doing poorly.
Don't make me go through every single injury I've had this season. It's definitely, if I look at my FPL optimized graph, you're the bastard with the big, huge luck factor on your team. I'm the opposite. Like, my team should be ranked higher than yours based on the decisions I've made.
Well, that's why people play the game and not fucking computers.
Ooh, he went there. He went there. But yeah, anyway, I'm happy with my team as is going forward for a long time, assuming I don't get injuries. So I think I'm just going to take that hit and just hope I don't have to take another one.
Yeah, I mean, last time you took a -8, you had like net 15 on those moves. So
yeah,
if you've given enough thought and that's the way you want to move forward, this fixture against Ipswich, you think Isak would have a good amount of chances, right? And I think that's comparatively to Solanke, who's not taking many shots versus Liverpool. It just that does make sense to me.
If Solanke outscores Isak this week by getting a haul against Liverpool, I quit. I tell you right now.
Could happen. Could happen. I mean, who's playing left back for Liverpool this week? Do we know? I don't think
Robertson serves his suspension midweek, so Robertson's available.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, thanks for pointing that out. I forgot that there's made up football midweek that other Americans don't care about as much.
I will just add that when I sold Solanke, it was before the Villa game, and he scored 16 points. And I watched 70 minutes of that Villa game. Literally, I was sat with my girlfriend going, Solanke is absolutely awful. I'm so glad I sold him.
So smug.
Awful for the first 70 minutes. And I was like, I made the best decision. And then he just went nuclear in like 10 minutes. But yeah, I think it's the right decision to get Isak for Solanke myself.
Right in the plums, that one. 16-pointer. Just absolutely ridiculous. All right, Ross, let's jump to you. How many transfers do you have going into game week 17, and what are your plans?
So I had 2 free transfers and 1.1 million in the bank, and I had 2 big issues to sort. Sorry, Dan, which was Aït-Nouri and maybe Cunha, which was my 2 Wolves assets. Because outside of that, the team's looking really solid. I've got João Pedro, Isak, Saka, Palmer, Salah, Enzo and Rodgers, who rotate really nicely. I've got Trent and Gabriel. Sanchez, as much as he frustrates me, I'm actually very happy having a Chelsea defensive asset. And Rico Lewis, I've still got in there, but I actually think with the fixtures coming up, I don't mind holding a City asset. So really, it was Aït-Nouri and then maybe Cunha. But I saw that Robinson was going up in price on Sunday night, and I knew that I wanted him as the asset to bring in. So I sold Aït-Nouri for Robinson on Sunday. So that's one issue sorted. So I'm now left with 1 free transfer and 1 million in the bank. Basically, if nothing happens with Cunha or the ban is extended and it's not for this week, I'll keep him. Otherwise, I will sell him. In terms of if I do sell him for this week, I'm very sad to say it would be for Chris Wood, because I don't love him as an asset. He's a really boring asset to bring in. He doesn't have a high ceiling. I don't think he'll maintain this goal scoring form. But when I look at the other options, there's just no one that stands out to me. I mean, it's so bad that I'm even looking at Wissa as an option. And that's a player that Dan's selling. I could go for Jimenez. And I've not ruled Jimenez out mainly due to the price and what that opens up. But the minutes I really try to bring in higher X-Men's players around this time of the year. So yeah, if it's next week, it will almost definitely be Cunha to Mateta, and I love that. Just don't know if I can justify doing that ahead of Arsenal. The option that I have is playing Enzo and Rodgers this week, bench Cunha if he is suspended or gets the ban, and then I move for Mateta next week. So play a 3-5-2 and just delay the transfer to allow me to get Mateta. So there are options there, but for now I'm pretty happy. Yeah, do you think?
I think so, because you clearly love Mateta. You clearly want him in your team. So
yeah, true.
Just delay the transfer. I think Rodgers at home to Man City is not a bad fixture anymore.
No, if you actually have a look at the places where City have conceded all of their goals and where they've made all of their errors, it's Guardiola, left centre back or left back, which is where Rodgers operates a lot of the time. So it's a good matchup for him. I mean, the last time I had a good gut feeling about an asset was Cunha in game week 7, and that just went so well that I'm like, if I've got another gut feeling, I should probably try and follow it. So we'll see. I mean, best case scenario is Cunha plays this weekend because it's a great fixture for him against Leicester.
Yeah, I was curious if you do roll, are there any upcoming game weeks that you're targeting for multiple moves? For example, I know some folks are saying like 18 is a good time, and then you're looking down the line like after the New Year's Day matches. So just kind of curious, do you have any other points in the upcoming game weeks that you're really trying to have multiple transfers available to possibly pivot?
My rough strategy right now is use transfers as freely as I want up to about game week 20 and then save for the assistant manager and double game week in 24. So I think I'm just going to really, like, as
Strong.
Sam was sort of alluding to, like, make my team look just where I'm like, I don't need to touch it unless something random happens, but it looks so solid that I could conceivably roll every week in the lead up to 24. So yeah, I'm basically going free for all, as many transfers as I want for the next few. And then yeah, round 20, I want my team to ideally be in a position where I don't need transfers, and then I've just got to just sit on my hands and just not get overly carried away and just try and roll, because I think not only is 24 the assistant manager and double, but there's also a relatively big fixture swing around 24 25 too. So yeah, that would be my advice to anyone listening, and if you're still listening at this point, good job. I would make
We
sure
appreciate
I
you.
would exactly, yeah, no, I'd make sure you save your transfers for 24 if you can.
Yeah, it's the beauty of podcasting. You put it on 1.25 times, then hopefully get through an hour and a half of FPL
Exactly.
talk. All right. Well, taking a look at my team, I have 4 free transfers going into this game week, and that's the second time this season that I've been able to get up to 4. So definitely in a position where I've been more patient than usual. And just for your reference, Ross, I had a shocking season last year. I was at 400K as my OR, which is by far my worst finish. And now Dan's kind of on the opposite side of that, where he's having a struggling season and doing some rash things, trying to get back into it. And that just kept compounding for me last season. But with that being said, I'm trying to like learn from that and be a little bit more patient with my picks. And that's why I think like when you just discuss about maybe I'll just roll and bench Cunha for this week and play these two guys. I mean, most players blank. So if you can get one of your two 5.0 assets to deliver points, then you should be in a good spot and you'll have the 2 frees heading into the next game week. So I have a lot of holes right now that I need to kind of just address in the upcoming game weeks. And that's mostly the Wolves assets have both Aitnuri and Cunha. And then I have Semenyo in my team. Not thrilled about him, but he's currently my first bench guy. So in my scenario, I would be playing, if Cunha gets injured and I want to roll the transfer, I'd be playing Semenyo away to Man U, which is not the greatest. And Semenyo is a player that I believe in, but he's blanked basically every single fixture since I got him.
Do we know if he's fit? I haven't heard anything, because if you watch that game, he came off holding his hamstring for sure.
Yeah, Iraola said it was hamstring tightness, not an injury, but that's still not great when it's a hamstring. But yeah, he confirmed it was tightness, not an injury, which is why he didn't have ice on it, but not ideal.
Yeah, and he's been playing like 90 minutes every match for a lot of this season,
exactly, yeah,
as one of their core players. So I'm in a spot where I might use 2 free transfers this week. And like you, on Sunday night, I also just did the Aitnuri transfer to Jedi. And you know, we're an FPL USA podcast around here, so I got to support the rare Americans that are out there that are in FPL. And 3 home fixtures out of the next 4 for Fulham seemed like a good guy to bring in. So I brought him in for Aitnuri. I'm starting Van Heck right now over Mikolenko. Bunch of bad options. Van Heck away to West Ham, Mikolenko home to Chelsea. I guess I'm going to bench Miko again, and hopefully I'll have 4 free transfers again next week. So in a spot where just trying to continue that momentum and ask Dan for all of his best advice, even though he wants to sabotage my team. And then lastly, just going to jump to Bucks's plans. And he actually wanted to ask one question for Raptor. He's thinking about Jota as a differential. Is it too early to go for him? And that would be a double move where he moves Semenyo and Solanke to Jota and Raul. So a bit out of left field and early, I think, for Jota, but come the double, he could be a potential punt. So curious on your thoughts here for our fallen co-hosts today.
I love Jota. He's a player that I've got a lot of points from in the past. I love the ceiling that he's got, and I think Leicester at home on Boxing Day is Jota the Slaughter hat trick written all over it. It just feels
Ooh,
like a fixture where he could start. It feels like a fixture where
love
he could
that.
do very well. But no, I wouldn't go near Jota at the moment, sadly. I just think he's only played 11 minutes. Apparently, he didn't train today, and we're recording this on Tuesday. Apparently, he wasn't in training not because of an injury, but just because he's just come back from injury. He can't train every day. He was saying that he's hopeful that he could play a part midweek. It doesn't sound like he's fully there. And I think the big change recently is that Luis Diaz has played as the 9 very effectively. So not only are you competing with Darwin Nunez now, he seems to be favouring Luis Diaz through the centre with Gakpo on the left. So I think if anything, Gakpo is probably the asset whose minutes look pretty good at the moment. And then you've arguably got the other 3 competing for that middle spot. But I love Jota, but unless you're going for a spicy sort of 1 week punt, I actually think what you said about the double is the thing that would put me off. Like, do you really want to be holding Jota as your third Liverpool asset ahead of a double where he's never going to start both games in that double? I'd much rather have Arne Slot or Van Dijk or something like that personally.
Yeah, that's a good shout. And I think last year in those doubles, I think a ton of managers got burned by Liverpool in terms of those other guys just rotating between each other on the flanks. So that's good to know, and Bucks will take that into consideration. If you're going to move Solanke, I would be targeting somebody like Isak or just going down. But time will tell. And now we want to give again a big thank you to you, Ross, the legendary prehistoric raptor. Tell the listeners where they can find you in all of your different outlets in the FPL community.
Yeah, thank you very much, firstly, for having me. I appreciate it. It's been really nice actually being a guest on someone else's podcast. So thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, just search for FPL Raptor anywhere. If you want more of this sort of podcast format, which I guess you enjoy if you've got to this point, I did start a podcast this season. It'd be lovely to have the pair of you on at some point if we can make it work. If you're ever down in London, but yeah, it's just FPL Therapy. So search on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube for FPL Therapy. In studio podcast once a week in a very similar sort of long form format. But yeah, I appreciate the invite on, and I've really enjoyed it today.
Can't thank you enough, and hopefully you will be experiencing many green arrows for Christmas. A haul or two coming down the chimney, put underneath the tree, waking up on Boxing Day. That is what we all want for you and all of our esteemed listeners. So thank you very much again for joining us. And you can find us at FPL USA Press Play wherever you listen to pods. And I think you can also listen to us in audio version on YouTube. We appreciate the time as always, and we'll catch you for the Game Week 18 preview next week.